So what dealership doesn't want to improve their lease portfolio, right, Alex?
Maybe used car dealers.
Well, that's true. I know working a lease at the dealership is it's just more difficult than getting your average purchase quote. There's just more variables involved. And that's not even counting the different lease programs from the manufacturers. That doesn't even mention, not to mention today's advertising surely hasn't done leasing any good. When you have lease payments of $399 a month, but after the fine print, the consumer needs $6,000 down just to get to that payment. So that's always, I know that's frustrating for us being a Benz dealership. It's more like $10,000 down to get to an $899 month payment. So, but there's a new service out there, and it's definitely, from my experience, makes it a lot more easier, not just for the consumer, but for the dealership as well. Nathan with Honcker, welcome back. This is your second time with us.
Never enough.
Never enough. How did you come up? I know we might have spoke about this in the first webinar, but for new people that have just joined us, how did you come up with Honcker?
I tried to lease a car actually in New York on Long Island, and my previous cars I had leased through a broker, really. And I tried to get a hold of my broker, and I think he was on vacation. Or it was the beginning of the month and he didn't have the programs yet, but he basically ignored me for like 3 days, and I really, really needed a car. So I was like, all right, I'll just go into a local. So that was a bad experience. And then I said, all right, I'll just go into a local car dealership. And I remember seeing an ad for the new Nissan Maxima. I was on a tight budget at the time. And I went into a local Nissan dealer. And I remember standing in the parking lot and I saw this beautiful Maxima SV. And I said, how much is it a month and how much down? I need a car like right now. And the salesperson was like, well, why don't you just come inside? We'll talk about it inside. And next thing I know, I sat down, I filled out a credit application. I went through the whole song and dance, and it was like hours just to get an actual price. And then after I got the actual price, I argued that the price was too high and was different than the advertised price. And he was like, well, the advertised price has fine print and subject to credit was one of the things that he mentioned. And I said, well, I have very good credit. And he's like, hold on a minute. And he goes back to the finance desk, and he comes back 20 minutes later and he tells me, well, you came back as a tier 3 with Nissan, or a tier 4, I think he said, actually.
Wow.
And I asked him to explain me what that meant. And he explained me money factors and said, well, you're not getting the best interest rate. And I argued about that. I said, I've been leasing cars my whole life and I have excellent credit. And we did this back and forth. In the end, I found out that I was actually a tier 1. But dealers like to, sometimes make some money there if there's an opportunity to. Anyway, sat there a whole day and left the dealership at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon without a car. And during the time that I was at the store, I was on my phone, being a tech entrepreneur and just, I guess, a regular American, looking to do the same thing I was doing in the store on the internet. And I realized quickly, like that day, that there was no way there were 2 things interesting that you couldn't do. You can get a ton of information about cars, a ton of data on cars, from OEM websites and dealership websites, third-party websites, and so on. But number 1, you couldn't get an actual lease payment. And number 2, there was nowhere to complete the transaction. So essentially the 2 things that you needed to come into the dealership for, there was no way to do on the internet. And as you mentioned before, I was actually involved in cybersecurity software at the time in a separate startup that was doing quite well. And I stopped that to start Honcker because I just saw it as an enormous opportunity, and all the things you read and the cliches about, build a company around a problem that you're solving for yourself and a bad experience that you have, and those are the successful businesses and so on. It just really spoke to me. I said, if I'm going through this, there's probably millions of Americans that are going through this at the same time. And that's how.
How long ago was that?
I'm sorry?
How long ago was that?
Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I know because I measure.
Think about that Nissan dealership.
And by the way, it's interesting.
Actually some laws around that they can't do that. But
Are they clients now?
No, I was just going to say it's really interesting because they're probably one of the only Nissan dealerships in New York that's not on the Honcker platform, which is really, they've gone through some ownership changes and they were hurt by Hurricane Sandy just before I had gone in there. So it's somewhat of a troubled store to begin with, but that's interesting.
Well, it sounds like a combination of things. In what I touched on, it is. I know as a salesperson, it's a lot easier to walk up to the desk and get a normal loan quote. But when you start asking for lease quotes, because of the different variables involved, some desking tools out there, they're not very accurate with lease quotes. So there's an intimidation factor there as well.
God, yeah. And especially if you're in like Chicago or Illinois in general, or Kentucky, where some of the tax setups around leasing are insane.
Yeah.
Have you broken into some of those markets yet, Nathan?
Specifically Chicago, we actually just signed our first sales rep in Chicago. She starts June 18th. So that is a market that we're going to go after. And with some of the tax changes in Chicago, favorable to the consumer as it relates to taxes, we think it's actually an up-and-coming lease market and is going to be exciting for us.
Well, congrats on that. I don't know that I'd call it favorable to consumers because it seems like they tax the payment and the car and the road you drive on and everything else up there. Like tax.
It's actually a fair observation. We won't get too deep into the tax market in Chicago.
That's a good idea.
You can technically even calculate a lease payment today that somewhat makes sense for the consumer. Is a step in a positive direction for Illinois consumers.
I'll agree with you there for sure.
Nathan, you've got your presentation queued up. Why don't we get started with the presentation and just give our viewers a little bit of lowdown what all Honcker is.
Sure. So what you see in front of you is the Honcker mobile app. And at the moment, we are only available on mobile for iOS and Android.
So
and when
a very modern way of doing it, right?
I'm sorry?
It's a very modern way of doing it, right? Mobile first.
It is absolutely a modern way of doing it, and we are a mobile first company. We did go live with the apps first, but I will add that we are building a web version as well, which will be released sometime shortly. We have to make some strategic decisions internally about that, but yes, certainly forward thinking. So what you see is the welcome screens that a consumer sees the first time they come into the app after they register. So when they register, which is one screen prior to this, we capture some very basic information on the consumer, name, address, and date of birth, and a few questions around rebates and incentives, a very, very quick registration. And in the background, we do a soft credit pull with Experian. And we then take that customer's information and run it through a proprietary credit matrix to appropriately tier customers, to the point that I made earlier about whether you're a tier 1 or a tier 4. With some of our partners and some of our own proprietary technology, we're able to, and a lot of dealer input, frankly, because there are dealers who can, for lack of a better term, get credit bumps, can't get credit bumps, and so on and so forth. All of that intelligence is in an algorithm that appropriately quotes consumers. So once you've registered, you come into the app and you see the screen right here on the left side. Enter make and model. If you know the car that you're looking for, it'll give you a little drop down. If you just know the car type, which is what you see on the right side, that's how you get into the app. Pardon me. And then once you're in, this is what you see. On the left side, you see a list of cars with actual monthly lease payments next to them. So we wanted to image this in a format that consumers are familiar with. So travel websites being an example, or other forms of websites where there's something somewhat expensive and an actual price next to it. And what we do here is we desk a deal essentially in real time. So each one of these cars, the black one, the red one, the gray one, and the blue one, are individual VINs, and there is a price next to them. You'll see this little drop down where you can change monthly term and mileage, all in real time. And of course, the price will change in real time. And we're taking into account to incorporate that price, everything that's necessary to desk a deal in a few seconds, or in a few milliseconds, actually, which right there is a huge value prop for a consumer, because imagine how long that normally takes when you go into a store. In addition to that, you'll notice this little filter here, which is representative over here, where you can say, hey, I just need, a full-size car with a moonroof and navigation. And of course, we'll filter those things for you. Some more filters on the right side, some examples of some of the screens you see.
What about the best deal?
So the best deals, you'll notice these little red ribbons, and this is like a work in progress, something that's ongoing in our development. We look for cars that are essentially an amazing deal, and we'll highlight them in what we call the deals of the day. And there'll always be somewhere between 40 and 100 vehicle types, make, model, trims, specific to that customer, specific to rebates that are relevant to them, specific to a dealer maybe wanting to move that car with the dealer input, which we'll get to in a moment, and so on and so forth. And we'll highlight those vehicles to the customer in case they're just looking for a steal. I need
So if a 39-month lease is better than the 36-month lease, and sometimes I know with some of your higher end vehicles, if you do a 27-month lease versus a 36, it's actually a much better deal.
Yes, absolutely. And one other thing you'll notice on the previous screen.
That's what I was asking about, the best terms.
Okay, so the best terms, if this is what you were referring to, is when you click on this little choice, it will automatically show you, exactly to your point, if a 27-month is better than a 36 or a 48 is better than a 39, specific to that vehicle, to you, to your geolocation, and so on and so forth. So it does all of the heavy lifting in the background for you to just point you straight to the best value immediately.
I mean, as a dealership, I'd probably just want to use the front end of this sometimes to quote the customer.
Yeah, call it a pencil tool.
Right.
Yeah.
By the way, believe it or not, there are plenty of dealers that actually use it, which is an entirely different conversation. But yeah, that's interesting, because it's instead of you having.
It's not a different conversation.
Okay, we can have it right now then. There are many, many dealers who are on the platform, or we've approached to join the platform, and they'll like pull their phone and I'm like, we use this all the time. So we're sold already.
100%. Yeah. Well, again, like I said earlier, it's just, there's so many variables involved when it comes down to leasing. And again, I think it's why a lot of dealerships, they have a tough time building out their portfolio with leases.
Well, shoot, even the DMS companies are not down to the penny accurate.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, that's true. And the other thing that's really refreshing about what we're doing is we pretty much get the programs within a couple of hours of them being released live on the platform. So it's fair to say that you can get a price on Honcker sometimes as early as 12 to 24 hours before you might be able to get a price from a dealership. Until there's the morning meeting and everybody's sort of figuring out what the programs for that month are. With us, it's just digitally uploaded literally within a couple of hours, and our pricing is already reflective of new monthly programs. So there's a lot of things here that can enhance your business or make things quicker.
And you're getting that data for every OEM?
Every single OEM, yes.
Okay.
So the screen that we're on right now is, once I choose a car, you come to the screen on the left right here, which is the information screen. And what we've done is we've tried to narrow down what is normally this long, arduous process of finding a car, applying for credit, choosing the specific trim, the colors, and so on and so forth. You can imagine the consumer sort of walking through the dealerships a lot, looking in the windows, what color is this one, what color is that one, or maybe opening up the book, or in some cases looking at a website. We really just give it to you, pardon me, front and center, every single piece of information on one screen. So we've narrowed down that long process to just a few screens. So on this one screen, everything you see is touchable. So you touch on the picture of the image of the car right here, it'll open it up in full screen. You click on some of these icons, it'll give you interior and exterior 360 views. You click on these, you'll see interior and exterior color swatches with descriptions of the colors, if it's leather, if it's leatherette, if it's cloth, and so on and so forth. Click on this little arrow, it'll give you the individual specs on the vehicle, including packages, MSRP, and so on and so forth. So that's what you have on the top side of this screen. And then on the bottom, we get straight to the point, which is the transaction. That big, bold lease call to action, which is what everybody wants, us, the dealership, and ultimately the consumer. You have another opportunity here to play around with your terms and mileage. You'll notice add-ons, which is the dealership's opportunity, one of the dealership's many opportunities to sell F&I and other add-on products. You click on those little screens and they open up bigger pop-ups that gives you more information on everything. You'll notice there's a little slider right here with a monthly payment above it, a due at signing underneath it with a little I. We offer 3 lease types. Taxes in the due at signing, move the slider over to the middle. Taxes get moved from the due at signing up into the monthly, move the slider over to the third. Everything gets pushed up into the monthly, so it's a 0 down lease. Those are the 3 that we think are
a true 0 down lease.
Exactly.
No tax and tags and everything. That's how
Which is also another thing that so many pencil tools out there can't do.
Yeah.
Also can't do one-pay leases, but that's a different story.
By the way, one-pay is a really interesting conversation. At the moment, we're not offering one-pay because there's very, very little demand in the market that we're in,
Right.
the markets that we're in. But at some point, we'll offer one-pay too. It'll be a little button and just say one-pay, and it'll give you, what the one-pay amounts are.
What's the rolling current lease balance?
So rolling current lease balance is something that we just introduced a few months ago, and we're actually even enhancing it a little further in the next few weeks, where we essentially offer consumers to get out of their existing lease early. So let's say I'm in a BMW 3 Series. I got 6 months, 9 months left on the lease. I'm bored of it. There's a new model come out. Maybe there is a early turning coupon. Maybe there isn't an early turning coupon. We'll automatically identify that for you. So if you see this roll in current lease balance, you click on it. It'll give you 2 options. If there's a monthly coupon, it'll automatically tell you, hey, you can turn in your lease now and it'll cost you nothing. Or tell us the amount of your monthly lease payment and we'll just roll it into your monthly leases. So here it says roll in, probably means that there is no specific early turn in. So it'll just take, the $1,200 you owe on your Honda Accord and it'll roll it into your 160 months. And then when the dealer gets this order, the dealer will know this guy has $1,200 left on his existing lease. He's already paying for it by rolling it into his monthly. Just calculate for that and make sure that that lease gets paid off when you deliver the new car and pick up the old one.
Man.
Something that we're offering shortly between now and the end of the summer, and we're spending a ton of time and energy on this with some partners on building this out, is the ability to get out of a trade, essentially a used car, which is also a humongous portion of business at the dealership and very, very time consuming. So we'll offer real-time trade value, pickup of your old car, instant payment for it, or apply it to your new lease, literally in one button. Same as we do with pretty much everything else.
Is that so? You'll be acquiring the used cars, or you'll have a company that does that?
No, we will not be acquiring the used cars, but we've partnered with companies that are in the business of acquiring used cars. So we'll offer the payment for it, and then together with our partners, we'll pick up.
Would the dealership have the option?
Say that again.
Would the dealership have the option?
That's precisely some of the stuff that we're thinking about and working on as we speak. How to the business side of it.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. We'll see.
All right. Again, I can definitely see how dealerships pull this out. I mean, to have all this data right here at your fingertip so quickly.
Yeah, and and look at it from the consumer's perspective as well. I mean, never has the consumer had such concise, relevant information, accurate, relevant information, literally in a couple of swipes. I mean, it's really, really different and very compelling relative to what's already out there, as far as the third-party lead providers and all the other stuff that's available on the internet today.
And so you're doing a credit worthiness check prior to them going in and searching for cars and looking at their exact payments and whatnot. So all that's kind of out of the way right up front, right?
It's a little bit more than a credit worthiness check. We're actually telling you that if you see a price for $160 a month with $1,708 due at signing, barring any, something that we really missed on your credit report or some history that wasn't readily available, the price you see is the price you pay. Obviously, you are ultimately subject to the bank making the ultimate credit decision. We are not a lender, and we make that very clear, and we are not ultimately making the credit decisions. Same as a dealer is not making a credit decision. Ultimately, they're just relaying the credit decision of the bank. But in excess of, I'm going to say close to 90% right now is where our numbers are at. Between 85 and 90% accuracy, the price you see is the price you pay. And in an instance, and our goal is to get over 95% accuracy, and that's working with companies like Route One and DealerTrack, for instant approval or denials, giving dealerships tools to set up their credit criteria on the back end of the system, refining our credit matrix to ultimately get it almost perfect. But that's a very interesting category, and again, very different than what you see out there. So for a startup that's only been live for approximately a year, to be close to 90% accuracy in a real-time instant payment, we think we're in a good place.
Yeah, that's a strong statement. And it's probably safe to assume that the difference from what you're showing and what might actually happen in the showroom at time of contracting that doesn't happen very often. There being a significant difference. Yeah.
Correct. And the flip side to that is that the dealership who's offering this particular vehicle essentially signs an agreement with us that they will honor the terms of what this transaction is. And that's a very important part of this as it relates to dealers. With ultimate respect to the dealer franchises out there, I think the ability to just say, look, we've set this up, and we'll show you the dealership back end in a second. And Honcker's tool for desking is penny perfect. There's no reason in the world why we'd have to go back to a consumer. Again, subject to credit, because ultimately the bank makes that decision. But unless there's a blatant mistake of a rebate being misapplied or incentive being misapplied and so on and so forth, which is, approximately in the 1% of all orders that we see, it's very, very fluid. The dealer has committed to it. The customer sees the price, and it's just, let's get this done. Ultimately, this transaction needs to feel as simple and as smooth as buying something on Amazon.
And that happens by hitting
why that Nissan dealer isn't on there.
That might explain it.
but that's what happened once you hit the submit button, right?
So once the consumer clicks lease, we ask them for a few basic questions. You'll see on the right side, and then the customer clicks submit. Once the customer clicks submit, they're prompted to upload a few pieces of information. And this screen, and we'll focus on the bottom of it for a quick second, this screen is super critical, because this right here, among the other things that we just mentioned, is the core value proposition of Honcker. Dealers have a ton of places to get leads. They don't need us for new leads, regardless of how creative the leads are with respect to other startups out there. What they're getting from us is a completed lease transaction. They're getting a VIN, they're getting a price, they're getting all of the customer's information. The customer's uploading the front and back of their driver's license. They're filling out the credit form right here. And eventually, once everything is approved, they're going to upload their insurance card and their insurance binder, any other steps that might be necessary in order to get the deal done, and so on and so forth. From the customer's perspective, everything is done through an app, quickly taking pictures of things, automatically submitted to the dealership. From the dealership's perspective, they're getting a completed lease transaction that they can essentially knock out in about 10 minutes. So it's very, very light, no overhead, set by the dealership's terms on the dealer side, and an Amazon-like experience on the consumer side.
What if there's other stipulations before approval? Maybe the bank wants something else. They want proof of something. Would that also go through the app?
Oops, sorry about that. Yes, it would absolutely go through the app. And I just went through some screens really quickly, and I'll go back for a second. So that's a good segue into the dealership's perspective. So when a dealer signs up with Honcker, they essentially sign a very simple, very basic agreement with us that relates to the sharing of the consumer data between us and the dealership, number one. Number two, that they agree to pay us depending on what kind of we have two forms of payment plans, subscription or per vehicle, or sometimes a hybrid of both. And they send us an inventory feed. Once they've done that, they're essentially live, which in most instances, is within 24 to 48 hours. We need no DMS integration or access. It's really just a function of sending us what I just mentioned, an inventory feed, signing an agreement. We then give you a username and password, and you have access to your dealership dashboard. And this is what you see on the dashboard. Number one, everything that happens inside of the app is controlled by the dealer. So the first and most important thing is pricing. How do I price my vehicles? So this is a screenshot of what we call the inventory tab. Dealership chooses their cars. They can do it by make, model, trim, age of inventory, type of vehicle, whatever. And they set their pricing. Essentially, we work at invoice, and they go above or below invoice. Once and their pricing can be iterated on the fly in real time. They make a change on the dashboard, the consumer will see a monthly payment change on the app. The second thing they set up is their dealership information, which you'll see right over here on this tab. I won't go through all of them, but it's basically, where do I want my PMA to be? Which lenders do I want Honcker to quote off of? Obviously, the captive is the default. What are my fees? Maybe I have a dock fee, maybe I have a tire tax or stuff like that. Very, very quick to set that up. Who at the dealership is be contacted when a lease comes in and stuff like that.
And a little bit of a neat thing there too is I remember you saying last time that you can actually go in and mark up acquisition fees in some of the other.
The money factor, a ton of stuff.
That's cool.
Yeah, we give you control over your credit tiers. If you're a lender that if you're a dealer that has a great relationship with a specific lender, and everybody can get approved at a tier 1, we give you a little button, say, approve even 620 scores at tier 1. If you're a guy who has no relationship with your bank, you have no analysts that you can speak to, and everybody's got to be true to tier, we can do it that way. You want to depend on the Honcker algorithm, you can do it that way. It's a ton of flexibility for dealerships to maximize gross, number one. And number two, just how they want their deals to be structured and what they ultimately want them to look like. And so it's basically,
I sign up, I send you my inventory. If I don't want to do anything, you just take the invoice price that I'm feeding you.
Exactly.
And that becomes the basis for everything, and everything else just works. You don't have to do much.
You don't have to do anything. You're exactly right. And we have a lot of dealers that just literally set it and forget it. And they're like, hey, sell my cars an invoice. When I get deals, I'll knock them out. So the next
one, you want to change it, you just go in here and change it.
Exactly.
Question: some of your manufacturers, I know Mercedes is one of those, and I believe Lexus. You can't give a quote to the customer or show or advertise a price less than MSRP until the customer contacts you.
Right.
However, if they're putting their information into the Honcker app, is that considered them contacting the dealership?
That's a great question, Jeff. I think that let me qualify what you just said for a second. So technically, you're correct. Mercedes and Lexus as two examples. They don't allow you to advertise a price below MSRP. They do allow you to quote a customer a price below MSRP. So BDC, for example, all day long, sends quotes to customers on email or phone and so on and so forth.
As long as the customer contacted them first.
Right. So we look at Honcker, and we have a ton of Mercedes dealerships and a ton of Lexus dealers. We look at Honcker as the customer has registered for the app. They've given their information, same as if they've given you information on your website. They've essentially contacted you. At that point, you can now digitally quote them or orally quote them, and you're not breaching those covenants of the advertising covenants on those agreements. And that's where we think the fine line here is. And we are acting within that, within that fine line, that this is a direct quote to the consumer. Two consumers sitting next to each other may get two different prices. You may have a 640 credit score. I may have a 740. And therefore you're quoted one thing and I'm quoted something else, or my zip code might be different, or I have Conquest and you don't, and so on and so forth. So it is a specific quote, and the customer has contacted you by registering for the app and saying, hey, this is the car that I'm interested in. He clicks on it and he sees a price for it. But that's a really interesting question.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Next, one of the other tabs of the 4 tabs is F&I and other add-ons. So we give dealerships the opportunity to load those things into the app. You saw where they were on the app before the customer clicks lease. You can also do it once you've introduced yourself to the customer, if you do it by phone or when you're doing delivery. And you can price it however you want. You can list whatever products you'd like to list. And this is actually very, very interesting, because the percentage conversion of F&I sales that we see on the app versus what an average store converts is more than double, at least more than double, depending on the manufacturer and the geolocation. So we encourage every single dealer to set up F&I. You'd be surprised how many consumers buy it when it's given to them in a way that they understand, where they don't feel like there's a pushy person, trying to convince them to buy it. So just
they can go in there, they can mess around with the payment, they can see how it's going to affect it.
Totally.
And I can back that up 100%. I was working with a smaller company that was doing a sort of a full transaction buy online. And that was one of the biggest pushbacks that we were getting from the dealerships was the F&I department. I'm not going to be able to sell my product. We're not going to be able to present. Our penetration is going to go down.
Right.
And we actually ended up seeing the opposite. Yeah.
And look, with respect to the dealers, again, dealers are essentially, you take F&I out and there's, 60% of the dealers in the country are just not profitable. So you must put an emphasis on F&I, and you have to make sure that it's front and center. And we give many opportunities for dealers to sell their F&I. And the dealers that pay attention to it, and it's interesting, we have one dealer who delivers their Honcker leases, and they literally come to the delivery with 2 different contracts, because even at the point of delivery, they're offering F&I again. And the second contract, if they have to make an adjustment to something, they're able to do it manually, and then the consumer will sign. So they have one without the F&I and then one blank, essentially, where they can plug in F&I. So we know how important it is. The last screen that you're looking at is the dashboard, the most important part of this dashboard, which is what happens when a consumer clicks the lease button and the lease gets pushed to the dealership. So the dealer gets a little notification, and we emphasize that we do not want these deals going to BDC, where essentially they get sunk. These are not leads. These are deals. So normally at a store, this will go to a salesperson, a general sales manager, and so on. And they get a little notification on their phone. You have a new Honcker lease. And this is what they see when they click on the link or when they open it on a desktop. They have the order number. They have the time that it was received, the vehicle, their stock number, their VIN, rebates. And if you click on it, it'll show you the individual rebates that were applied, the price that the customer saw for the monthly payment, due at signing, term, mileage, and the profit or loss on the front end, above or below invoice. The customer has already uploaded, and all these things are clickable. Customer has already uploaded his driver's license. Ignore the insurance card for the moment. You get the customer's information. You get encrypted his private information, including credit score, social security number, place of employment, everything. You asked before about stipulations. We have a little drop down. You can add any stipulations you want. If there's a rebate for military, you need that proof. Just click on it. Customer gets a little notification in the app that says, hey, please take a picture of your military ID card. If you need conquest or loyalty, you need a contract uploaded. Everything is done from the dashboard where you just click a little button. Customer gets a little notification and an email that tells them go into the app and upload that information. The dealership's job here is extremely easy. Everything is served to them on a silver platter. All they need to do is confirm the inventory, run credit, confirm credit, customer uploads insurance, and set up the vehicle for delivery. It's essentially 3 steps for the dealer. Dealers that are active on Honcker, which many of our dealer base is, can, like I said before, can complete a transaction and have a vehicle ready for delivery within a few minutes. Obviously, there are instances where the customer is not in a rush, or instances where things need clarification, or stuff has to get sent back to a bank, and stuff like that. But generally speaking, at least 50% of the time, the transaction should be literally within a few minutes. Obviously, we understand there's end of month, dealers are busy, it's middle of the night, dealers are closed, and stuff like that. But the system is completely built around that to take all that into account. And that's basically, the front and the back end of the system in a nutshell.
Well, if my pay plan was built on selling deals, especially if I was an internet manager, and it was just it was a component of my pay that was based on cars delivered, I would be all over this. It's just here's a couple, 10 to 30 or 40 deals a month right there.
Yeah. Well, that goes into my question. Like, what are some success stories? Some dealerships that maybe had low lease penetration, and now they get on the Honcker platform, and what's the percentage?
I think our stated goal when we started the company was, if in 5 years we account for somewhere between 10 and 20% of overall new car sales at a dealership in the major cities in the country, then Honcker is a massive success. I can tell you that there is a percentage of dealers on Honcker already that have been live with us for less than a year, of which a portion was a beta, that we already account for a minimum of 10% of their monthly new car sales. And if you don't believe me, I can refer to an Auto News article that was published a couple of weeks ago, where they interviewed a few dealers in the New York tri-state area that blatantly said, we're doing 20. I think it was one dealer said 20 or 25 cars per month. The other one said 20 or 25 or 30 cars per month. And those stores, based on the volume in those individual stores, that easily equates for 10%, in some cases higher. So it's not always the case. We do have a heavy emphasis on non-luxury at the moment. We're trying to get deeper penetration into luxury. So it's sort of 80-20, which is probably reflective of what's going on in general, luxury, non-luxury across the country, or maybe closer to 90-10. So it's heavily weighted towards non-luxury at the moment, but as I mentioned, we're putting an emphasis on luxury. And we've just begun our own customer acquisition and marketing, our own dealer acquisition and marketing. So it's still very, very early days, really early days, but the numbers are looking promising. And like I said, if in 5 years we're up to between 10 and 20% of monthly volume new car sales, then we've succeeded.
Now, so if I'm a dealer in a marketplace that Honcker hasn't penetrated yet, and I'm the first one in my marketplace to sign up, what kind of results should I expect?
It's an interesting question, and it really just depends on where you're located. If you're in Wisconsin and you're a highway store, it's probably a little harder for us to, specifically market in your area if you have 2 or 3 brands. But if you're in a big city, if you're the first with Honcker in Philadelphia or Chicago or Miami, you can expect business literally immediately. The interest and outreach that we've got from consumers across the country asking, when are you available in my area, or when can we expect you to go live, is overwhelming in many of the cities. We can't do it we can't get to those cities fast enough. So we've turned ourselves on in different parts of the country, and literally the same or the next day. I think Philly and Miami, I just mentioned them. They just happen to be the newest markets that we're on. Specifically, I think the dealerships that went live with us, literally the same or the next day, started to see business immediately, and it's consistently grown, in the few months that we've been live there. So, it obviously doesn't start at 10% on the first day. It trickles in, and then once we have enough manufacturers in a specific area, we start to market there, and then it's a ripple effect.
There's dealerships that are really successful. Are there any best practices that really stick out that you could inform?
Right. Are they promoting Honcker on their website and stuff like that?
So I was just going to say, that's the first thing, is the dealers that are promoting us obviously are the most successful. They're essentially going on their social media and saying, hey, you can do the transaction on an app in a couple of minutes. So dealers that are doing that, obviously, not only are they helping us and vice versa, but they are very successful. They have a database of consumers already, and when it validates us, there's a trust factor that they're addressing there. But even more than that, to some degree, I would say the dealers that are active, dealers that go into their inventory every once in a while, choose the aged cars, mark them down, dealers that offer a discount here or there, dealers that play around with their PMA or their lenders and stuff like that. So absolutely, we've seen the dealers that are proactively engaged in the platform are the most successful dealers. The dealers that are sort of like, yeah, whatever, if I get something, it's great. Naturally, they get, they're getting less.
For sure. It's interesting. It's great stuff. Alex, any more questions?
Well, I had one last one from me, at least, and then I'll give it back to you, Jeff. I found it interesting that you come from another company prior to Honcker called Destructs, which I was telling you before we got started is pretty cool in that it was a way for somebody to put a post into social media, whether it be Facebook or Twitter or whatnot, and be able to delete it later, which leads me to believe that you're very in tune with privacy. And, you also mentioned that you're not taking any of the dealers' data in from the DMS, which is always a hot topic for most dealers. They don't want to feed that information out. So, maybe I don't really have a question. I guess I'm kind of more saying it's cool that you're, very much into keeping the data private and taking care of it. But are there any maybe comments you want to add to what I'm saying here? Or?
I think privacy is a very important part of the online consumer experience, and we're very conscious of that. And as much as consumers will share their lives on the web, which they clearly do, there are still things that need to be protected and things that consumers are very conscious of not of making sure they don't end up in the wrong hands. There are, there's financial information that you don't want to share because it can really hurt your life. There's private information that relates to relationships and stuff like that. And we think when you do a transaction like this, you need to be super conscious of those things. And the laws are very restrictive, if you will, around this. They're very clear in many cases, federal, state, and local laws, and it's somewhat overwhelming to make sure that you abide by them. The overall privacy laws, dealership compliance is something that's we're very conscious of. Also, dealers have done a very, very good job in making sure that they're compliant with the laws and stuff like that. So all I'd say is that as a topic of conversation, it's a very big one and a very important one, and one that we're very conscious of and consistently trying to improve, as the app builds out. We're definitely not perfect, but we're very mindful of it.
All right. Well, you know what? And I lied. I do have another question. It's not from me, though. It's from the audience. The audience is asking, in an area where customers are still weary of leasing, does this app help show the benefits of leasing versus purchase?
I'm sitting in a room with my marketing team, and I just turned to the left when you said that, because we actually just discussed that yesterday. It's a great question, and the answer is that we haven't done a good job yet in educating consumers about the value proposition of leasing, and then ultimately why this is a good way to do it. But in the next couple of weeks, we will make an effort to fix that and to start to promote the concept of leasing and why consumers should go this way versus the others. And just to add one other thing to that, we think leasing in general is going to evolve, and it is evolving to some degree already. There are some innovative startups that are doing some interesting things with leasing. We have a couple things that we're working on internally that will make this very, very interesting. We know used car leasing has been a topic of conversation for a long time, still hasn't got a lot of traction, but it's a very interesting space. Car sharing and subscriptions are getting interesting. So we have to educate people about how it is today and the value prop, and then we sort of have to lead the way into the future as well.
So if a dealership wants to sign up, how do they do so?
So it's dealerdesk@honcker.com, which is an email address that goes straight to our sales and business development team. Dealerdesk@honcker.com, and they can find it at honcker.com, HONCKER. You can call 212-HONCKER. You can go to DealerRefresh, and there's a big bold ad right on the top of the page that will take you straight to a form. Put 2 or 3 pieces of information in there, and we'll contact you. And as I mentioned earlier, it's extremely easy and simple. There's no commitments. It doesn't cost anything to go live with us. So it's something that every dealer should at least try. And we've yet to have a dealer leave that's come on, and we're touching on about 450 by the end of this month, probably over 500 dealerships.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. And again, like you mentioned, I believe you still have a Deals for Dealers going on, and I think it's up first. So many dealerships have signed up. You had a free 90-day period, which of course it's sort of free just to get on the platform to begin with. And
yes, but the free 90-day means whatever, whether it's a per delivered vehicle fee or a subscription fee, depending on where you are, that will be waived for the first 90 days for any dealer who signs up specifically through the DealerRefresh sign up form.
Well, please, anyone watching, get on that. If you want to, interested in Honcker and interested in increasing your leasing profile or portfolio, check out Honcker and jump on DealerRefresh, and you can always click the links over here as well. So Nathan, I think that's it. Alex?
Yeah, nice work, Nathan.
Thank you guys very much.
Fantastic.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully we'll meet again soon.
Sounds great. Bye.
See ya.